All right. Good afternoon, everybody. We'll give you another 10 to 20 seconds to join us, and we'll start. All right. So, good afternoon. Welcome to our first event of the Jewish Studies program at Penn State and the Department of History. This is our first event for this academic year in our lecture series of Jewish histories of the Middle East. It's quite different than what we used to have. Regularly, we would have served you now a very nice lunch, and we would gather on campus, but these are not normal days. So we'll make the best out of it. I want to thank the Jewish Studies program for sponsoring this event. We have a few more events coming up next week on September 22nd at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. We are going to have a celebration of the new book of our new faculty member, Tamir Sorek. It's on the social biography of Tawfiq Zayad. You can find details on that event and registration link and details about upcoming events in our new Facebook page of Jewish Studies at Penn State. And without further ado, I would like to introduce our speaker today. We are very happy to host Gal Stav, PhD student from the Department of Religion at Syracuse University. Gal Stav started her PhD program at Syracuse in 2018. Her research focuses on the absence of Mizrahi Jews from the collective memory of the State of Israel. She's interested in post-colonial theory, media studies and cultural memory. Her BA in media and journalism from Sapir College in Israel, and an international master's degree in Holocaust studies at the University of Haifa. We are very happy to have her speaking here today on Grandma Sultana making Mofletta in Ghetto, Warsaw, the personal experiences of North African Jewry during World War II. You can use the Q&A function to raise questions, and we'll collect them and answer them at the end of the talk. Thank you very much. Gal, the floor is yours.
Hi, everyone. I'm very excited. I don't think I ever spoke on this subject on Zoom and not in personal, and this personal connection make it very weird for me, as well as sitting in this background, which is not behind my library, but that's because I didn't want my 4 years old and my dogs will join us. So we will have to live with this COVID background. So I want to basically start and tell you about my research. During my master degree studies in Haifa University, I was interested about the World War II in North Africa. During the seminar paper I have to submit during my studies, I was start analyzing testimonies from Yad Vashem archive. In one of the paper, I completely focused on Libya and Tunisia. I read approximately 30 out of the testimonies that have for Tunisia and Libya, and I couldn't understand why, but I felt uncomfortable reading those testimonies. I couldn't exactly point what made me feel uncomfortable while I was reading them. A few days before I submitted my paper, I actually decided that it could be a wonderful idea to go and interview my grandfather, which already passed 3.5 years ago. He was from Libya. You can see him here in this picture. And this is my dad sitting with him. And the testimony that I collected from my grandfather was completely different and opposite. And there was huge difference between what I had from Yad Vashem archive and the story I heard from my grandfather, which make me speak with my parents about it. And my dad told me an amazing, unique story. He told me that when he was in the 5th grade, or the 4th grade, he sat in history class, and the teacher taught them about the Holocaust in Europe. He went back home, sat with my grandfather, and told him what he was just what they were studying today. My grandfather told my father, you know, we have experienced similar experience. We were in the first labor camp. We were not allowed to go to school. We were have to hide. Some of us were deported. He told it in a very vague way, but what my dad got out of that he had not to say similar equivalent, but he had mutual experience. So we went back to his teacher the next day and told her that story. And the teacher told my dad he has a vivid imagination, but it never happened in North Africa. I want to connect us to this day. And actually, the whole ground point for this talk is that we love to think that a lot have been changed since my dad was in the 4th grade till today. But I don't think it's the case, and I want to give you 2 small examples to show you how, to show you why. So what are we seeing here on the left? It's from Vanza when in 1942 when they decided about the final solution. You can see here under Italy the number of the Italian Jews when they say it's 58,000 Jews. The number on Italy in Europe of Jews was 32,000. If you calculate the remain, where went another 30,000 Jews, it actually adds up perfectly with the number of Jews that were under Italian colony in North Africa. The reason why I present you this, it's because in 2006, when Yad Vashem, which is the National Holocaust Research Institution in Israel, was created a curriculum for schools to teach about World War II in North Africa. They've been asked of this specific point. They basically have to determine whether North African Jewry was part of the final solution or not. Although the number adds up, and although a few historians came to them and showed them that it at least have to be researched, the chief historian of Yad Vashem, Professor Dan Michman, and I'm quoting him, said, I decided not to decide. On the right here, you see the artist Gal Meir. He held a history book from Israel for high school. He held 9 pages, which shows the percentage of how we dedicated to teach about North Africa during this war compared to European. And as someone that did her master's degree in Holocaust research, I can tell you that out of 2 years of a coursework, I didn't even have 1 course dedicated to North African Jewry. So this led me to the research I've been made, because when I looked at my grandfather's testimony, that opened up to me a whole new different world of memorials, of diary, of personal books that people wrote, compared to the testimony that we have in Yad Vashem. So I was basically interested to see why is this gap, on what this gap is actually represent to us, why there is such a gap in the story or in the narrative or in the details in between the memoirs and in between the testimonies. I think that's a very interesting point of explain how this gap was even created. Hannah Yablonka, which is a researcher for that subject, in 2008 published a research. She went to Yad Vashem archive and she took all of the 189 testimony, which is another point to talk about. How come we have only 189 testimonies in the National Archive versus 10,000s of testimony of of European Jews. And to each testimony, they were attached a form. It's called witness page, if I'm doing direct translation. And in this witness page, the person have to fill it up before the interview even starts. And he need to answer them. The first question after he filled up his name, he need to answer, are you a Holocaust survivor? And this witness page was attached to every single one of the 10,000 testimonies we have for European Jewry. When we're looking at the 189 testimonies that we have in Yad Vashem archive, 95 of them did not even have this page attached to them, which means they weren't even given to ask this question, which basically even show us maybe about the assumption that the interviewer arrived during the interview, which means they didn't even let them to define themselves as such. And in another 90 testimonies that this form was attached, 46 or 47 did not even answer this question. They were completely avoid this question. Only 26 says they define themselves as such, and the rest says they are not. So when we think about the power relation, when these people, the North African Jewry that was wanted and willing to share their story of their days from World War II, sitting there, and they were already being framed in the terminology and the experience and the definition of what they have gone through. In this picture, you see the grandparents of my grandfather. So I was basically curious to see, is it a different narrative? Is it a different structure? Is it a gap like I was assuming there is? And if it is, how is it, in which way it's come to, in which way we can see it? So I basically, what I did is comparative literature research. I took 10 testimonies and 10 memorials. And in the first thing that I did, I reached every one of them separately. And I was trying to see what is the structure, the narrative structure of each one of them. The mutual thing that I found is in both of the genres, they both have the same narrative structure that going synchronously with the pattern of life. They both have the first chapter, their life before the war. The second chapter, if we can define it like that, will be the war, their life during the war, and then after, early after they arrive to Israel. So that was something they both share, like the narrative structure of their story. The second thing I did is I was marked and isolated all of the events and that they're telling about, which mean all of during the war, like the time they were meeting with their Arab neighbor, and I'm using the word Arab, Libyan Arabs, and not Muslim, because 90% of the testimonies refer them as an Libyan Arabs and not as Muslim Arab. And then I was identify the event, and then the second step was to identify the memories when they were telling me about their childhood, and the third was to see if there is any difference in the terminology while they are telling about the event that they've gone through. What I just basically said. So what I said is that they have identical narrative structure. So what I wanna share with you right now is that only one aspect, only one theme that I found more, but with the time frame that we have, I thought that will be that would be more interesting. So I want to present for you the theme to talk about their memories with the Arab population, the Muslim population in Libya. So although they both have similar narrative structure, the difference that I found is that in the testimonies, their memories from the interaction with the Arab with the Muslim population in Libya was centered only during the wartime, which means there were barely any mentions of their interaction and memories and relationship with them during the first chapter in their narrative, I mean, before the war, versus in the memorials, we can see, even with just the amount, plenty of memories detailing about interaction. As for them, they went to school together, or from your childhood. The second thing I found is what I defined as a positive memories and negative memories, because the difference between the amount in the positive and negative memories with the interaction with the Muslim in Libya was significant. While in the testimonies, the vast majority of the memories that they have with the Arab Libya was negative. In the memorial, there is more balanced picture, almost divided half and half. So they told about the horrors they were going through there during the war, but there was also room there for the positive memories they had. So even here, you can see the numbers in the memorial. So what I did, as I told you, I took all of the accident. I listed all of the time they mentions the interaction that they have with the Arabs in Libya. So each one of them, this is 12, 10. You can see the number here, and how is it divided between positive memory and negative memory. So you can see the number are almost even up, and not even up, they're giving it more room, versus the testimonies from Yad Vashem that they mention the interaction that they have with the Muslim population in Libya. And you can see how significantly the negative memories with numbers are. I want to give you an example from the memories book, from the memorial book. So there was an Arab named Majed who collected us to save us from the mob, and we followed him by foot. When I was a baby, my mother turned ill and I refused breastfeeding. There was a religious Arab, name was Ansher. He took a glass of water and prayed over it and prayed over my mother, and I immediately went back to breastfeeding. There was a daughter of a Muslim neighbor with whom I very much like to play. I kept the translation very direct. This is exactly the way they say it, or wrote it in Hebrew. I didn't want to fix their English to more grammatically level. Negative memory. One day, two young Arab wanted to kill me. I was alone on one of the paths returning back from school. When we returned home, we found a broken walls at home, broken windows. The Arab looked everything. We took everything we had. The Arab used to come and glance us into the camp, will say us, walk like that for free, like dogs. So although it's rough, you can still see balance. You can still see that their narrative leave a room for both negative memory and positive memory. And also, I want to give you an example from the testimonies. We will talk a second about like what is another difference there. So, an example of a positive memory. We are all in the same classroom, and we were all playing ball. Children are children. Mother was severely ill, and her doctor truly performed miracle, not just medication. She would always bring her leaves for teeth or other thing. When there were a bombing, everyone was scared. Why does it have very fine? No ill to eat. During the witnesses, we all would run on the Arab's neighbor, concrete, and lay there together with them. Sample of negative. They seized houses, everything we had in the house. At my grandfather's home, there were 7 rooms. There left nothing. But there was a fear, all of the time fear from the Arab, because they will kidnap Jewish females, took them, and until today, it's unknown where they are. To this day, I see an Arab, I stop thinking, because they have no faith. I need to move my Zoom, I don't see it. Can turn against you. Another thing that's very important for me to emphasize, I didn't view them, I didn't check their history truth about what they're saying. That is, I think, the main thing that's important about the memory and in a general collective memory from World War II. It doesn't matter to me if it has historical truth in that, and not to me in personal, but like for at least for the way they remember it. And one second. There is another thing that actually simply that I think that the way when I was trying to think like how we can explain that, like how we can explain the gap in between the positive memory and the negative memory, how we can explain that in the memory book, in the diaries, we have more room for balanced narrative versus Yad Vashem, which is the institutional organization that takes the testimony. I think that one of the explanations that I feel comfortable with is during that year, not that I think that much has been changed, but especially during the 60s in Eichmann trial, I don't think there was a room to contain any positive image of an enemy. And when we moved back from the Nazi enemy, now we have a new enemy in Israel. So I don't think the interviewer can even contain a positive image of that. Not to mention that during those years, the North African Jewry, when they arrive to Israel, have to clean themselves from any Arabness that they have, that they brought inside of them, and matching themselves to the European pattern. Another example that's coming out of here that I think it's very, very interesting that I found that shows the power relation that I thought brought to this imbalance narrative is when it's something that repeats himself when the interviewer from Yad Vashem asked her interviewer, where did you study? What did you do? What do you remember? It's showing repeatedly that every time they said, I studied Italian, I studied French, I went to the gymnasia, like I study how to be a teacher, everything that shows higher education, everything that shows another European language that they were speaking was facing a wall of the interviewer who didn't believe her. We can see it in you can see it in the testimonies. In one time she asked, the interviewer from Yad Vashem asked Rachel in her testimony, are you sure you speak in Italian? Did you really went to Italian school? What do you mean you speak Italian? To what level do you speak Italian? And it's spread during the interview, which means we have 60 pages of interview almost. And during the 60 pages, it shows in 7 different places that she asked her, because she couldn't believe that the woman that sat in front of her, that obviously by the way she speak to her, look for her inferior, can actually speak the European language that she's speaking. And all of this small example, which also collect over to the biggest theme that I found there, it shows that nothing actually has been changed, as we talked about here. Because when they start, as Hannah Blonka says, this interview or this testimony, when they have this image or this prestiges against them, I mean, what room does it actually leave them to tell the story, and how of this story structure their narrative even before they even start sharing that. This is basically, in general, what I've done. So if you have any question, I would love to hear.
All right, thank you so much. And while the Q&A option is open, I want to thank you. This talk was great and certainly left room for many, many questions. I'll use my position as the host to ask you the first 2 questions. One of them is something that we see with Mizrahi communities in Israel and the relationship with the collective memory. I wonder if you could find what was the role the umbrella organizations, right? The Irgunei Gag in Israel for Libyan Jews, for Maghrebi Jews, did they try to place Libyan Jews or North African Jews in the institutional memory of the Holocaust?
I think the best example for that let's start from the name of the lecture that I said, Grandma Sultana prepare a Mofletta in Ghetto, Warsaw. This actually taken from an op-ed that was published in Haaretz newspaper in 1961. And that was published as a response to Nahum Goldberg, which was the head of the Jewish Federation back in the days. And he said that out loud in the news on Eichmann trial background to the North African Jews, that Eichmann trial was spark their desire to speak about their experience during World War II. And he told them, don't jump on the Holocaust wagon. Don't jump on a wagon that it's not yours. I think another example for that is after Eichmann's sentence has been done in the chair, they fought, the court system in Israel fought, they choose 2 Libyan Jews to perform the execute, because they said they will not get hurt of it. They don't have any personal memory out of it. They are not related to this issue. So yes, there were, the Libyan organization was trying to approach, but the response was, that's not part of your story. And even when they want to share their stories, as the Yad Vashem was being forced kind of to do it, that was how they were treated.
Great. And one more question, and then we'll move to the questions that I get on the Q&A here. So about, what was it, 7-8 years ago, Yossi Sukari published, to the best of my knowledge, the first novel on Holocaust experience among North African Jews. I'm talking about Benghazi, Bergen-Belsen.
Yeah.
Did you see any influence or any impact of this of the publication or the publicity of this book on the willingness of North African Jews to share their experience?
First, personally, I think it's a great book, and I think it's doing a lot of justice to the place and the room we need to give them. And I also think we can see another, on surface, on a very superficial level, we can say it's a progress. We can see on our National Memorial Day that they led the Libyan Jews to light the torch in the ceremony. And we see another TV show, Israeli TV show, which was very famous, Zaguri Imperia. I can send a link if you're interested later. That was talking about their experience there and how they say this is not our Holocaust. So is it help to raise this issue into the Israeli public discourse? The answer is yes. But we need to ask ourselves a different question. We need to ask ourselves, do we make a progress in the institutional level? And unfortunately, I think the answer is not enough. We don't have, although I think I can give you another example. When the Libyan Jews was approached and want to get, how do you say kaspe shilumim in English?
Reparations.
Yeah, money from Germany, and they've been approved for that. So that's basically make the public opinion think that here you go, you've been acknowledged. But the truth is that we need to ask ourselves, are they getting psychologists, for instance, help? Does they have any, for instance, we have AMCHA, which is like the biggest institution in Israel for helping like psychologists for European Jewry. Do we give room, or do we give the options for the Jewish, from North Africa to approach and even say, maybe they don't have it, maybe they do have it. The question is, I'm not determined that they have it. I'm just saying no one give them the option to say if they are or they are not. We still need to look about the curriculum that going to this day in Israel education system, and not only in Israel. When we're looking about the Holocaust, the way we teach the Holocaust all over the world, I can tell you here in the States, I was curious. I opened their history book. I don't even speak about how many pages they divided to this subject, which is very little, not even a word of North Africa. So we need to look about, for what my perspective, about the education system and about the institution level budget. Is it exist? The answer is no. So yes, it helped in our activist community. It's helping our the post-colonialist research, but in the big picture, it didn't. Not enough, at least.
Thank you. So now we have a few questions from the audience. First one is from our colleague, Michelle Campos. Can you clarify the languages in which Yad Vashem interviews took place and in which the memoirs were published? Did the language shape the possibilities of specific positive or negative memories?
Let's start from the first part. And if I'm missing something of the question. So both of the memoirs and both of the testimonies were done in Hebrew, which is another huge issue to take in consideration. The one thing I can say that more present in the testimonies than in the memoir, because in the testimony, it's basically they record them and then there was a transcript. So in the Yad Vashem testimony, you can see how they combine sometimes word in Arabic and how the interviewer stopped them and said, wait a second, what did you just said? Or even laugh about it. Or I have an example in one of the testimony that she shared that her Muslim neighbor used to invite her to eat knakash. And I know what is that because my grandmother used to make it. So for me, it wasn't weird. 2 sentences after, the interviewer stopped her and says, what did you just say? How did you call this food? Knakash? And she laughed about her. So I think the gap between the language was a very big issue, and the memories was in Hebrew as well. I couldn't find the memories, at least not for this research that was written in Arabic. I'm sure there exist over there, but that's why we have our still big dissertation ahead of us. But as for what I did right now, all of the texts were in Hebrew. And what was the last part of the question?
If did the language shape the possibilities of specific positive or negative memories? So the fact that
the one thing I noticed, I think it is just from using the term in the Yad Vashem testimonies, they use the terms Arabs in Libya. Whereas versus in the memories they're using a lot our Muslim neighbors, my Muslim neighbor, and I think it's very interesting the definition between Muslim and Arab, because the definition Arab was not even exist in the word in Libya. So I think it is another terminology, very important distinction to make. Did I miss something in this question?
No, but there are more.
Okay.
Another one from Michelle. I was fascinated by the contrast in the language of the positive scenarios you quote in the Yad Vashem testimonies versus the memoirs. The first are very impersonal, vague, almost hypothetical, whereas the latter are very specific and even evoke a person behind the term Arab. Did you find this accurate?
Yes, and I think that's why I felt the need after that to say that I don't judge them historically. I don't actually want to check if what they're saying is true or not. That job I will leave for historian. I'm interested in their story and in the power relationship in their story. I don't feel comfortable to judge it, but it's make me feel uncomfortable as well. The gap was too big. Some of the stories I was curious in some of the stories, like I had some event that I could, out of curiosity, not because I want to do it, I was just like, I want to see if I can find documentation of this event in some history book. There was some I found, some I didn't. The generalization as well versus the treated a specific person was another thing that made me feel a little bit uncomfortable. So yeah, I noticed that, but I don't have I don't have an accurate answer beside of the fact that like I just decided that it's not part of my job right now to put them on trial of like whether they're saying is true or not.
All right, thank you. Jason Cogan asks, it seems you are critical of the interviewers at Yad Vashem. Have you presented your findings to Yad Vashem so it can improve the method of interviewing to get more accurate picture of what the interviewees suffered?
First, we need to remember, and it might be something I was supposed to mention in the beginning, because I want to check the collective memory of a specific, and the gap in the collective memories. All of the years of the memory and the testimonies were between 1959 to 1962. I'm not talking about things that happen in today, because I say to myself, if you want to check if there is gap in the way they structure the collective memory, you need to check the same exact year. Yad Vashem today barely continue with that mission, and I will say that I think during academic research that also see himself as an activist research that want to change reality, as we are not approaching to the government and help us with issues and we solve it ourselves. I mean, today there is so many organizations like Livluv, which is an institution for, it's a museum for an archive for the World War II in North Africa, and we have Moreshet, which is an organization of Moroccan during that time. They are doing these missions today. So we have more testimony that doesn't even include in Yad Vashem from outside organization. Do I think Yad Vashem should change a few stuff? Yes. But as I said, let's start from this point. Because when the chief historian said, I decided not to decide, what does it even mean when your job of your institution is doing research? How can you decide not to decide? You basically decide, I don't want to invest the financial resource in this kind of research. This is the truth behind, I mean, the statement behind such a vague thing of decide and not to decide. So yes, I do think they need to change it, but I think before they need to change the way they interview, they need to make a bigger decision about putting the required finance or budget in research this area, because all of the research of North African Jewry during the Holocaust, it's a huge black lagoon. There is barely, yeah, research has been done lately, but it's, with percentage, it's still a black hole of that still wait for a research. It barely exists.
Thank you. We have a few more, but Michelle Campos asked to clarify that what she was asking was not on if you find the memories accurate, but if her impression of your presentation was accurate. So that the contrast in the language of the positive scenario, the different reflection of reality that was that you provided was this accurate. So does it make sense?
No, can you try to explain it again?
Yeah, so I'll read the question again and then I'll add a clarification. Okay. I was fascinated by the contrast in the language of the positive scenarios you quote in the Yad Vashem testimonies versus the memories. The first are very impersonal, vague, almost hypothetical, whereas the latter are very specific and even evoke a person behind the term Arab. So if you find that the memories are more personal and more relatable and
you're talking about that. Let me see if I got it right. Michelle, if you're saying that in Yad Vashem, in the testimonies, the language are more vague, and in the memories, it's more personal. Yes, yes, 100%.
All right. Yeah, and another question. Ann Kelly Knowles has a fascinating article on applying qualitative geography to Holocaust memories. So paying attention to how space and time intersect with particular emotions in these testimonies. I would be fascinated to hear more about how Libya, the city, village, the Jewish quarter, the home, the camp, etc., are described in these two genres that you studied. To be fair, this might be food for thought. This is another one from Michelle.
First of all, you are more than welcome to send me an email, and I would love to share with you. I would love to share with you the testimonies and the memories that I have. what she was asking to hear more? I'm sorry. About?
How space and time intersect with particular emotions in this testimony. So I would be fascinated to hear more about how Libya, the city, village, the Jewish quarter, the home, the camp are described in these two genres that you study.
So again, the structure of the narrative is very significant here, because although they both have the same three-chapter structure of story, before the war, and after the war, in the memories book, it's all one complex. It's all one mishmash.
Mm-hmm.
There is, they can say that I was in it. For instance, I have one in one of the memory that I really recall good, is that her name Boba, and she's telling in her memory how she's sitting with her daughter in the living room, and she tell her about her experience in a force camp, and she telling it in the third chapter of her life, versus in Yad Vashem testimony. There is no jumping in between memories. There is no jumping in between, like, now I'm already in Israel and I recall something when I was 8, or now when I was a kid, I could never believe that will happen to us 15 years later. The structure there, all the memories and all of the events are going chronological, in a very systematic, dry way, versus the memory book that also they define these three separate times. They did jump in between time and space.
Thank you. I believe it's Josie Grieger that asks, where do you see the inclusion of Mizrahi narratives in 10 years? Do you think that there will be greater inclusion?
I think the time is a critical aspect here. For instance, my grandfather passed away 3.5 years ago. My grandmother is still alive, and I basically think that we are the last generation that can actually interview them and have more primarily research. And I think that if we will not put it in our top priority research mission, it will stay a black hole that will not be able, we will not be able to fix or to fulfill. So I wish more people were interested in that subject and want to write about the subject. Join us, please. We have a huge gap. We need you.
Yeah. And last question for now comes from an anonymous attendee. This is the first time I've ever heard of the Libyan Jews and their Holocaust experience. Is there still an existing Jewish population in Libya? Are there many Libyan Holocaust survivors still alive?
So I think we need first to start with the terminology, Holocaust. We still don't have terminology how to define what was going through them. We don't have it in the research area, no matter what discipline you're going, we don't have it in the public discourse. And this is, I think, one of the most fundamental problems that we have in this research area. How do you define what they have gone through? And the problem is, I call it the suffer stairs, because it's always been compared to what they've been through in Europe. And obviously that cannot be compared. And there is another massive problem, is that when we're looking about the collective memory on the Holocaust, we're looking about since 1939 to 1942. We basically talking about since the Hitler was elected, versus their memory of that time is only in the war year. We are only talking about 2 years. So when you take the big Holocaust, but you basically narrow their experience only to the war, but you say the war has nothing to do with the Holocaust because this is the collective memory in Israel, it is not connected to each other. You exclude them for the most fundamental aspect that there is. And how do we connect it in 10 years? That was the, can you connect, can you?
That was the...
about how much Libyan, there is still very small and very minor Jews that live in Libya. I didn't talk with them. I don't know how to define themselves. All of the Libyans that I was talking with them are living in Israel. So I honestly don't know. But it's a very interesting subject that I hope I could answer sometimes in the future.
Yeah, maybe Libya will join the peace train. So I believe that we answered all the questions. If there are no more questions coming, we'll give it another like 10 seconds.
Where is my email? I'm really inviting you to write me an email. I can send you the testimonies and the journal. It's already organized, but so it's really interesting to see it. If you're interested in that, I would love to send it.
Great.
So that's my email.
So thank you so much, Gal. It was very it was great to hear about this research and to reintegrate the Middle East into broader narratives and historiographies. And we thank you so much for giving us the option today. So imagine the entire room giving you a standing ovation, and and we'll end it here. Thank you so much, and thank you all for joining us today. Stay tuned for future events. Bye-bye.
Bye.